welcome back to Red Ted Art. Oh yes, it's time to do some more sewing today. We're making a little Ted sewing pouch. Make sure you use the materials that you've got at home, whether it's denim, felt, fabric. Here we have some t-shirt yarn, but again, it's really about making the most of what you've got already and then getting sewing to make this adorable Ted pouch, because our little Ted printable can go on any person, any fabric. Come on, let's take a look and see how he's made. So to make your basic Ted bag, you will need some fabric. Now I'm going to use denim here, which is quite tough, but we'll talk about that later. You can also use felt, or you can use other fabrics, whatever you wish as a background. You're going to use some felt for the Ted shapes themselves, some embroidery twines, and then later also something to make a strap with. But I'm firstly going to cut out all my Ted shapes, and then we'll get to the next steps. So the first thing we want to do once we've got our basic shapes is to sew a Ted to our front piece of the fabric. So you need to decide whether you're going to be using the denim this way, that way, whether you'd like a long, thin bag, a wide bag. So it's really up to you. And I think it's easier to put Ted on the fabric first before you make your little pouch, because then you can access the back of the sewing much easier. And look, here's our little Ted looking super duper cute. So there's a couple of choices you've got next. I've assembled it just so you can see what it looks like. You can now take white thin thread and sew these three parts on, or you can, and then black for these parts, and then show you these in a minute. Or you can use glue to glue these all in place. Now obviously when you add glue, it might just not last as long, and over time something might fall off. Similarly, I want to add some black outlines to the tie, and I want to add some little hairy bits to the tummy, so as to for the details. Now I'm going to use denim. Denim is very thick, so that when you're sewing it's going to be a little bit tough to get that needle through, but it will make sure that everything stays on really, really neat. So I would first sew on the basics on this level, and then use a thicker needle to sew onto the denim afterwards. But we'll first start with sewing on the detail. I've decided to sew it all because I want it to really last. But like I said, you can glue this, and the nose part, and then we'd only sew this bit. But we're going to do the sewing instead, because I want this to last for as long as possible. Sewn on, a little bit of fluff. Now we want to sew TED onto our backing fabric. Now there's lots of different things you can do with the backing fabric. You can either later on, not now obviously, sew it together and then turn it inside out so that you have a nice neat seam. You can, what we're going to do is we're going to use pinking shears. They basically create this zigzag edge which help prevent fraying, which means you can basically just sew along the edge as it is. Now the reason I cut that first is because I want to have a little gap of about 1 centimetre where I'm going to put my stitches. If you're a perfectionist, you probably do want to sew some hems, so you could fold that over. This was going to be your top. I'm just going to keep it really simple and I'm going to sew this as we go along. But it's really up to you at this stage how detailed and how neat you make this project. I'm going to keep it quite rough and ready, and actually when denim frays I quite like the look of it, so it's really a question of preference. The reason I cut this now is just that I've got this neat edge for me to sew TED around, and I've got lots of fluff on him. So all we're going to do, again, get some white thread, make a little knot at the back, and then I'm just going to do a little over stitch. You have to use the over stitch. You can probably use a running stitch, that would work too, maybe even a blanket stitch, but the over stitch for me is just what I fancy doing because I quite like the look of it. So you might want to get another needle. Let's get this one out and just help to pin it. Okay, so for the over stitch, you literally go over the edge and then back, and then over and back. I'll try that again just in case you can't see it. So you go over the edge and then poke it in through the back. And I think that gives quite a nice neat little edge. But like I said, a simple running stitch would look great too. So I'm going to go all the way around now, and then we're going to bring our two sides together, neaten up the edges, and sew the little bag itself. Okay, as I like to do things as I go along and make things up, I actually decided, because my thread ran out here, why not leave the top bit open and then we have a cute little pocket. You don't want to put too much in this pocket because obviously you don't want to stretch TED, but I've just finished sewing here. I'm going to continue sewing up here and go all the way around, and then we have an adorable TED pocket on the front of our little bag. So I'm just going to carry on doing that and then we'll have a look at the end. Okay, for those of you who've asked, this is how you then tie off your thread. So I've got my last stitch. I'm going to push my needle underneath, and then you see there's a loop, push it through, and then I'm going to do it again, underneath, here's a loop, push it through, and that should make a nice little knot. And then you can just simply run it a little bit underneath the fabric and then gently snip it off. Just don't cut the fabric when you do it. I'll give it a little pull. Oh. Here we go. So we've sewn on our little TED a pocket, which I think will be super fun to have as an extra. Now, ideally you should get a pencil and a pen and draw some straight lines. I'm a little bit lazy, so I'm going to do it like this. I meant to say earlier on, when you're talking about different stitches and finishes, so for example, if you don't like this method and you don't want your fabric fraying, a really good alternative is to use felt. So instead of the denim, just use felt. That was actually my original plan, but then I decided that I had a lot of denim and I do like to upcycle, so I thought that would be fun to use the denim. But felt would be great, and you can also use on the edges, you can do a blanket stitch, so that looks really nice. So you need to get, I'm going to fold this down when I'm sewing, so I'm going to sew across, and then I need to get a second piece for the other side, which is exactly the same size, and also cut that out as neatly as possible, and then we're going to get sewing. So I'm going to begin by using some needles. I mean, if you've got some pins, even better, and I'm going to just give this a straight edge. It just means that sort of the part of the pocket where you're putting your hand in and out of is as neat as possible. But again, like I mentioned, you know, you can do this on a sewing machine. You don't have to do it. If you're using felt, that saves you this extra step, because with felt you don't need to worry about fraying. And all I'm going to do is take my thread I'm going to go into the back, or actually you can go in between if you want, so you don't see the little end bit. So I've put it in between. And I'm just going to do a back stitch throughout. Now I've got a great video on the back stitch where you can really see the thread. This is really difficult to see because I've chosen black on blue, but basically you go, here's your, where you've come out, you go back, and then you come back forward. So here's the thread, and you push through, and that's your first back stitch, stitch. And like I said, do check out the iCards down below, and you can see it better because that's really hard to see, isn't it? So you go back and then forward, and then that's how you carry on. So I'll carry on with that. I'll do both sides, so we've got the 2 sets ready, and then we'll do our nice pretty stitch. And those of you who've been asking, so now I've got the thread at the end. What do I need to do? I push it between the 2 halves. I can see my last stitch, and I'm just going to put my needle underneath, and as I come round, go through the loop to make a knot. So again, needle underneath, there's a little loop, push it through, and then you can trim it. That's how easy it is to knot off. So it's time to bring our bag together. Now I've got here some T-shirt yarn. I did a 4 braid for the sort of holder. I've got a great video up here and down below that you can check out on how to make T-shirt yarn, and also how to do a 4 braid. Now if you don't have T-shirt yarn, you can either make some, or you can use some yarn and just plait it, or you can make a holder from denim. So really it is about work with what you've got. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my double threaded yarn that I think I've made a bit long. I'm going to just push it through the center, and then I'm going to place this between my 2 pieces of denim. Now this is going to be a bit tough, so you might want somebody to help you with this part because there's quite a lot of layers you're trying to sew through. So I'm just going to push it. Can you see? And I'm just going to put another stitch in. And to be honest, that should really hold it in place. There we go. Just keep it like that. Nice and strong. My thread is very strong, and it's got a good hold. But you know, maybe I'll just do another one just in case. Push it here. And then just make sure it's all secure. Here we go. You can, if you want, sew your bag first and then sew this on afterwards, but I wanted to do it this way. So now I've got one end secured. I'm going to keep it very simple, and I'm just going to do a running stitch all the way down. Like I mentioned, blanket stitch would be really nice, and it's a good way to stop the fraying. But like I said, I'm embracing the fraying, so I don't mind, and I'm just going to do a running stitch. Again, if you want to find out more about those stitches, I've got some great videos showing you how to do a blanket stitch and a running stitch in great detail. But you know, here is the very basics. You're literally going in, and then on the back out. Just make sure you do catch both sides, and you've got a nice neat stitch on both sides. And I'm just going to go all the way around and finish that off. So last little bit. Luckily my thread is still long enough to knot it. I'm going to bring it in, fold it over the top, and then bring my thread and push it through. And then just make sure that you've got a couple of stitches in place to really secure your handle. Because you don't want this coming off whilst you're using your little purse. Maybe one underneath. And then you knot off your thread again. So oopsie, like we've done in the other ones. I'm just going to go back on myself, make a little loop, push it through the loop, and that creates a little knot. And then do it again, push it through, got a little loop, push it through the knot, and again it's done. And then to finish it off, you obviously don't want to see the thread hanging out, so I'm just going to push it inside maybe just catch it down here so you don't see it, and then trim it. There we go, little trim. And I'm so excited. Your little bag, look at that. It's finished, isn't that cute? Oh, can't wait to show my kids when they get home from school. There'll probably be a little bit of fighting over it. Love that it's got the little pouch. And yeah, so fun. Now remember, I have some other sewing projects. I made a little Ted softie. Isn't he cute? Slightly smaller size, but similar sort of pattern and similar sort of process. If you get into sewing and you want to have another go, why don't you have a go at this one? But yeah, in the meantime, enjoy your little bag. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Above all, keep watching, keep sewing, and I'd love to see you here again soon. Take care. Bye.